Rule number one, and we're bringing you bedtime stories from my book, Beyond Cuddle Party. Rule number one, pajamas stay on the whole time. It's easy to take off your clothes and have sex. People do it all the time. But opening up your soul to someone, letting them into your spirit, thoughts, future, fears, hopes, dreams, that is being naked by Rob Bell. Cuddle parties are all about depth, communication, connection, and play. They are completely non-sexual, and the first step towards keeping that way is to make sure that clothing remains on. What I love about this rule and is that the container it creates is one that many, if not most, people never get to experience in their lifetime. A place where touch, consent, and connection are all happening without the possibility of sex entering in. Many of us equate touch, especially cuddling, with sex. So what happens when we open that equation up? What I have experienced is a higher level of trust, a greater depth of connection, more meaningful conversations, and just touching because touch feels good. All the stories of, if I do this, will he think I mean I'm okay with that? Or will she take my flirting to mean I now want to sleep with her? Or defaulting to old standby routines start to disappear. Instead, you're more able to be in this moment, feeling exactly what's happening to you. Everything begins to slow down. You're more aware of your breath, of the hairs on your arms, of what you are not asking for, of what you no longer need to hide. Because you have your clothing as a shield in an anticipated way. The fact that you can't get naked leaves you free to explore every other level of your bare self. The moment that you feel just possibly you're walking down the street naked, exposing too much of your heart and your mind and what exists on the inside, showing too much of yourself, that is the moment you might be starting to get it right, by Neil Gaiman. The most touching example of what Neil is referring to was when I got a front row seat to an amazingly courageous woman's experience. The cuddle party she came to was a lot like any other cuddle party, but for her, it was the biggest steps and gifts she'd ever allowed herself. She showed up that Sunday night, timid, tearful, with one foot in the door, but most of her body ready to bolt at any sudden movement. She declined my hug of greeting and looked utterly stunned when I offered back, "Thank you for taking care of yourself," with a smile. I helped her get comfortable in her own corner so she had room to observe without one anxiety with me. Because often if we can give our fears a voice, they seem much less scary. She looked at me as if I were a cross between a long hoped for lifeline and an alien from the farthest planet she could imagine. For a moment, I thought she was going to answer, because her eyes became a little less guarded. But then she clamped her lips tighter and she shook her head. During the welcome circle, as we went around the room introducing ourselves, she said her name and shared her word from the bowl of words that we all choose from. Anxious. So relevant as the words usually are. Again, it looked like she had a lot more to say. Instead, she put her head down and passed the bowl to the next attendee. As I went through the rules that night, I paid particular attention to this woman. At times, she was captivated, her eyes glued to mine. At times, she just sat there silently sobbing. Other times, she seemed completely distracted, not even in the room at all. As we came to the last exercise in the welcome circle, which is done in groups of 3, she got up and sat next to me. I usually don't participate in the icebreakers, but felt this would be a good occasion for a powerful exception. I invited everyone to join a triad and led them into a rich negotiating experience. In one round, everyone gets to say no to everything. Another round, they get to say yes to everything, not actually doing it. But in the final round, they get to offer what they would love to do with the other 2 people in their group. Then they negotiate. From the combination of everyone's desires in the group, they keep negotiating until everyone is a hell yes, and then they get to do that activity together. After I turned them loose to request, negotiate, and experience their little groups, I turned all my attention to the woman next to me. She began by asking if she could touch my leg with her leg. I said yes, giggling inside as I remembered my nervousness when first approaching Reed all those years before. She moved very slowly and deliberately until her leg was just brushing against mine. She began talking, and once she let herself start, the words began pouring out. She shared about her childhood abuse, being gang raped as a teenager, and then going almost immediately into a super violent marriage. I asked her to pause for a moment while I turned everyone else loose from their groups of 3 to co-create that night's cuddle party, then turned back to this brave woman, leg to leg, heart to heart with me. She was able to say all the stuff that had been bottled up inside her for years. Her story ended with her husband passing away 8 years ago, and how she'd not allowed herself to be touched since, rarely even leaving her house. But when an online friend sent her a link about this cuddle party, something that she thought had died long ago was reawakened. As scared as she was, she knew she had to attend. She eventually asked if I would spoon with her, and I said yes. Later, she even allowed herself to be a sandwich in a 3-person snuggle. During the closing circle, I opened the floor for aha moments, challenges, gratitudes, and anything else that people wanted to express or have witnessed. This beautiful woman was able to share with the group what it had taken for her to be there that night, and how grateful she was for the feeling of hope she was leaving with, that perhaps things could be different, that she could be different. Then she made one final request. Would we be willing to find a way for everyone in the circle who wanted to put a finger on her? Just a finger, but she would like to see what that felt like. The people in the circle were a yes, and I will never forget how radiantly her face transformed as we each laid a single finger on her body. I absolutely believe the whole transformation could not have happened without a non-sexual container that helped liberate exploration where there's a discomfort around touch and being touched. I also love the playfulness this rule brings out when adults get to spend an afternoon or an evening in their PJs. How many of us grew up going to sleepovers where we stayed up all night, eating junk food, building pillow forts, playing superheroes in our pajamas, and often ended up in a big pile, accidental cuddling. And how after that our sharing would just start tumbling out. We now know that extended touch or cuddling produces the chemical oxytocin in our bodies. Oxytocin is a hormone that does everything from making you feel good to helping you feel connected to others. New research is suggesting that oxytocin plays a crucial role in enabling us to not forge and strengthen our social relations, but also to stave off a number of psychological and physiological problems. But more conceptually, oxytocin is proving to be a critical ingredient in what makes us human. George Dvorsky, 8 Reasons Why Oxytocin is the most amazing molecule in the world. What a gift to be able to relive some of those childhood memories as an adult. Cuddle parties create a container for tapping into that childlike joy where we get to touch for touch's sake. Talk about anything. Explore and experiment with the edge of our comfort zone because there's an agreed upon boundary, a mutual limit, in this case, sexuality. That is factored out of the equation. This leaves all parties free to explore right up to the threshold, in large measure because it's safe to explore when a specific boundary is offered. As another example, take the study that was done with grade school children playing in a schoolyard at recess. The question, what would happen if their playground fence was removed? The changes were remarkable. With the fence absent, then children huddled fearfully by the school door or stayed together in the middle of the playground. One would imagine they would fearlessly explore the newly unbounded environment. Instead, without a fence, the children were not able to see a given boundary or limit, and thus were more reluctant to leave the perceived safety of the group the center. Without the fence, they became more cautious. They drew in and restricted their activity to the known structure of the playground equipment. When the fences were returned to their original place, guess what happened? The very next day, those same children were all over the playground again, playing right up to the fence, happy and secure. Thus, in a very real sense, the fence, rather than being simply an instrument of constraint, became one of liberation. Adults, like these children, have an innate need for and an appreciation of structure. What happens when we begin to decide where our own fences lie? When we give ourselves permission to play right up to the edge, sometimes even climb up on a past fence to see where we want to play today. One fence I always liked to climb was playing dress up. For as long as I can remember, I've enjoyed any opportunity for the ritual and joy of trying on and selecting my clothes for special occasion. I love prom, school dances, and Halloween because it gave me the excuse I thought I needed, the permission to express myself. As I started on the convention circuit, my favorite accessory was a flower in my hair. There was something fulfilling about getting to be fancy, even in a small way. When I began going to workshops, it was a fantastic excuse to dress up, to wear flowers, exotic dresses, leggings with slits cut out, and other things that made me feel sexy. But I would have never dared to wear my special selections if I haven't given myself the permission that arose from the fact that I was going to a workshop. At one particular workshop, the facilitator, Lawrence Lanoff, a good friend of mine I admired and was quite attracted to, on the second to last day, he said to me, "Monique, I appreciate the extra time you take to make yourself feel good by looking so good." He looked me up and down and let me see his appreciation, then moved back on to facilitator mode. Sadly, at the time, I thought he was mocking me, or even worse, he thought I was pathetic. After all, since he noticed me dressing up, he must think I was doing it only for him, to impress and entice him. In actuality, his appreciation was just a side benefit, because I dressed up for myself so I could show up as confidently as I was able to. I was still super trapped in many of my own insecurities that boiled down to this core issue. I had to prove my right to exist. Forward 6 months to New Year's Eve, I was texting the same facilitator who was now, besides a friend, a collaborator, and deep love of mine. It dawned on me what he had meant all those months ago. He had been appreciating me for giving myself permission to dress up for me. It was my joy and my own beauty that brightened up the room and made it a gift for him and everyone else there. I couldn't wait to share this realization with him. He sent back a smiley face and agreed. I got it. From that moment, it was like some unseen shackles were dropped. Some hidden voices were silenced, and I began dressing in outrageous ways, wearing costumes of my own design, leg warmers on my arms, furry pants, fairy princess dresses and wings, and so much more, just because it brought me joy. So as I walked around in my own personal design, every moment was a fantastic one because I was doing something I loved and I was accepting and offering myself to the world. How does this transfer to Cuddle Party? Well, I'd started out always bringing my PJs in a bag and changing when I got to the party. But as I grew more comfortable in my own skin and in wearing more of my insides on my outsides, I began wearing my pajamas in the car. Then in the store before the car, and then sometimes I wore them all day, everywhere I went, just because I could. I remember the first time I dared to wear my pajamas in public. I had just attended a cuddle party at Reed's Loft in Oakland, and the next day I was still wearing my PJs as I hopped into my little red rental car and onto the I-5 to drive home to San Diego. With the windows down, I was rocking out, moving and singing with my favorite songs as I like to do on my long drives. There was another car that kept driving up close behind me. When I slowed down and moved over to the right to let the car go by, that car slowed down and drove up next to mine on the shoulder of the freeway. I finally turned to see what they could possibly want, and it was a very cute man who had written his number on a sheet of paper and was holding it up while he was driving, inviting me to call him. I laughed, still not believing this was actually happening, and I dialed his number. We flirted back and forth by phone for the next 20 minutes until we decided to stop for lunch. He was a beautiful Italian actor from LA, and my carefree, dancing, pajama-wearing ways had enticed him to want to get to know me better. That experience began to open my mind to do things, to wear things, to be myself, because it made me happy regardless of what anyone else thought. And then we have the exercise for rule number 1. Are you ready? Give yourself permission to wear costumes in public. where whatever helps you feel vulnerable, beautiful, confident, and able to show up emotionally disrobed and naked. It may be that polka dot bikini you've been waiting for an excuse to wear. It could be that formal dress that you've been eyeing in the local thrift store, a flapper dress, a furry coat, or maybe your edge is actually wearing your pajamas outside your bedroom. The invitation is to open your imagination. Let go of caring what anyone else will think. Let go of what's proper, classy, or cool, and let yourself wear on the outside however you feel on the inside. What if we chose to walk around naked? Clothing could be optional, but I'm talking about a deeper nakedness. What if every decision, every interaction, every unedited word, every gesture, every touch, every step came from our own raw, naked truth, presence, yes, of this moment? Thanks for joining me for rule number 1.